Hello and welcome back to the Purpose Playbook. I've just literally said that the countdown on the platform that we use scares me. I don't really know why, because I don't look scared, but it's just the suspense of it. Today we're joined by Jane. Jane started out working with young offenders at just 19 years old, and at 30, and over the last 35 years, has followed her nose into pioneering roles within the care sector. So I know this story. I know Jane and have spoken with her previously. Brian hasn't, so it's going to be really, I think, interesting for us to sort of unpick that and talk about your journey. You're at the forefront of some initiatives, Storyteller, which we'll get into, 3FT. Aimed at improving the experience of foster families. And I think, you're super creative and passionate about what you do, and really looking forward to unpicking the story. So, welcome.
Cool. Thank you for having me. Just pleasure to be here. Always happy to chat. As you know, chat. Rain me in.
We love it. And we have met. I have been on a meeting with you previously. And You coming off that meeting, Rich will tell you that I was super inspired by all the stuff you're doing. So it's going to be really good to find out more about it.
Perfect.
So let's go right back to young Jane, the very start of Jane's life, and tell us a bit about yourself and what it looked like.
Oh bloody hell! All the way back.
As far back as you want to go.
I started working with young offenders when I was 19. That was as I'd had enough of school. I was the kid who did well at school, O-levels, A-levels, but I became more and more kind of disenfranchised, I suppose. I was expected to go to uni, would have been first in the family going to uni, but I'd had enough, and I needed to leave. I needed to leave home. I needed to get out of that environment. I played hockey, I did loads of sport, and I read. That's really what I did. I was no bother as a teenager at all. So, I grew up in the Northwest, and I joined an organisation called Community Service Volunteers, and they take young people. I'd still really recommend them. They're still there. They take young people and move you away from your home area. So that's what brought me down to Kent. I am now based in Kent, and I've been here ever since I was 19. To come down and they place volunteers into helping professions, into projects where you can just get experience with. And that was just phenomenal for me. That experience was phenomenal for me in terms of being given opportunity. I kind of had no business being given, age 19, 20, 21.
And what made you, what's the story behind making you want to go into something like that?
Right.
We meet a lot of caring people and a lot of people that want to do stuff, but there's normally a bit of a story on why people get into what they get into.
Yeah, and I don't think I've ever really talked about this publicly. I don't talk about it much because it's just a backstory, isn't it? There's a couple of people who know some of it, and I've started talking about it a little bit more because the couple of people who know something about it are mostly care experienced folk. I'm connected to a lot of care experienced folk, and I started to feel with a few people with whom I became quite close. It's like, I know all about your story because it's part of what you bring. It's part of, what you contribute, the generosity of sharing. I hope not everything, I hope there's a lot that's private and stays private, but I know a lot about your story. So look, I don't need to talk about my story, but it just feels reciprocally respectful to just give you a little bit of it. And I'm kind of my motivation for talking about it a little bit here as well is that we all bring our own stories. We all bring our own needs. If we're in the helping professions, chances are something has brought us into them, which is what you're kind of alluding to. And I think that's really important because we can feel altruistic and we're not. We're really not. We're in this work to serve some purpose, to meet some of our own needs. And that's okay, so long as what we hang on to is, whose needs am I meeting at any point? And what are my own needs here? Because if I deny I've got any, I stand no chance of meeting them. And if I'm not meeting my own needs, I'm kind of vampiring off, the people we're here to help. I'm kind of going kind of under the radar a little bit to get my own needs met. Whereas it's much more honest and much more responsible, much more professional, much more appropriate for me to dig into what my own needs are a little bit in order that I can get on and meet them so that they don't cloud my work trying to meet the needs of kids.
It's really,
so that's...
we speak to a lot of people, and I do find a theme, even actually with myself and Brian more so actually, is like very selfless. I think there's a large population within this sector of people that don't necessarily think of their own needs at all, and they're not, they don't.
I mean, funnily enough, I was just thinking there when you were talking. Me and Rich, we were away last week, and we had our first bit of time off in a long time, and I sat there, and I think sometimes you get so consumed with what's really difficult. I can't remember. I've just been to one of our houses this morning. I can't remember the last time I visited that house because you're constantly dealing with other stuff. And I went in and met 2 young people this morning, and it just gave me a huge lift. So my thing is always, I am selfless. I want to help other people. But when you stop seeing what you're doing, and you're dealing with the finance, the HR stuff, the everything that business entails, and that needs doing, don't get me wrong, but you always have to remember why you do it and what you need out of it. And that's given me a massive, massive boost this morning, because I'm like, it was so lovely to see why we do this.
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, you've got to keep yourself topped up. And, do you know what? I'd actually challenge the selfless thing a bit as well, really creatively and positively challenge it, because if we... myself, so 19, who am I to have anything to offer to young offenders when I'm 19? I've done nothing. I've played hockey, I've thrown the javelin, I've read a lot of books, I've got my O levels. I'm just a 19-year-old.
You read a lot of books?
I've read a few.
You knew I was going to bring it up, Jane.
Do you know what? I've even they're packed away. I've still got some of my childhood books as well, actually, because I so loved them.
The only broke
the
child was, I think, Roger Red Hat.
Right, really showing the intellect here. He's brought, before the podcast even started, Brian, we did a big session on the books behind Jane. I don't think he's ever so many books in his life.
Do you want to see the rest?
Yeah, show us the rest.
Look at that. That's called a library, Brian.
but how many have I read cover to cover, and they're not all mine, and it's 35 years worth. That's the thing. So,
but anyway, carry on. Sorry.
Well. So no, because we'll jump around and it's all relevant. Because even the me reading loads of books when I was a kid, it speaks to the question I haven't answered yet, which is what took me into the work. But I'm going to stick with selfless for a second, because who was I age 19? The most powerful thing we can bring to our work, helping particularly children, is ourselves. It is myself. What can I most powerfully bring? It is myself. It is my humanity. It is my empathy. It is my willingness to share the kids' pain. And as a human being, all I have to do is sit next to them. I think one of the memories I shared with you was me sitting on the floor whilst the child sat in the bottom of his wardrobe sobbing, and all I did was sit. Now, it doesn't matter whether I'm 19 or 69 at that point. If I'm willing to just share his pain and be in that moment where he's just besides himself, and the pain he's feeling is because he's just lost a mate who's left. But actually that taps into all the pain of all the loss he's ever had in his life. And if I can sit in that moment with him, there's nothing more I can do. And what more does he need, really? I'm sharing how hard life is with him. And hopefully then he'll find his way out. So anyway, who I am as a human being is really the most powerful thing I can bring to the relationship that is the means by which we help our children. That's really all it's about. And also, if I then learn a bit of theory and gain some skills, I can use myself as a barometer for what's really going on in this relationship with that kid. I've said a lot. Everything that's happened to that kid in front of me is in their body. That child is bringing to this moment in the here and now everything that's ever happened to them because they experienced it. So I can read the files. Why not? Why wouldn't you? But the files will not tell me everything that child's been through. And the files will not tell me that child's perspective on what they've been through. Whereas if I just really tune in and pay attention to that kid in front of me, I have access to everything that's ever happened. So if I can get used to using myself, my emotions, my gut feel, my how heightened I am or not from moment to moment to moment, because our kids change emotional state from moment to moment. You just try and keep up with them. Trying to keep up with them is a task. If I can really tune in and use myself as a source of information for what's going on with that kid because I'm attached to that kid in relationship, I can know so much more. It's
real information. It's really interesting actually, because we met Dougie, who I know you've met.
Amazing.
We met Dougie a few weeks ago, and we were having an interesting conversation. It keeps cropping up, and it's one of my biggest bugbears. Is we judge people on paperwork, right? So in terms of like, you're sent a referral, you're sent paperwork, yeah, and they've had a missing episode. Well, they've had a missing episode because that relationship that you're talking about hasn't been built within the home or within the family home, or so the paperwork says they abscond. Okay.
Absolutely.
But why do they abscond? So you haven't built the relationship. So what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is you build facts on that young person, and something that might not cause someone else trauma is causing them trauma, but you're getting to know that by the relationship building, which then enables you to have a better impact on what a plan looks like for that child, because you're not going off a piece of paper that's happened somewhere else.
Absolutely. And you think in terms of attachment and attunement, I'm literally tuning into who that person is. And how I relate to who that person is from the person I am. And from that attuned place, if we then think about, mother and baby studies, and it's the carer's task to tune into the infant's needs, all that kind of stuff, then I'm getting to know what that child's needs are. I'm not just getting to know them. I'm not just building the relationship. I'm getting to really know what that child's needs are, because if they're developmentally younger than their chronological age, that's the best source of information for me to know exactly where they are developmentally. And once I know that, I can begin to figure out how to fill those gaps. I can begin to figure out how to give them some kind of experience that will help them move through their developmental stages. So the thing about being selfless is actually, I think it's a mistake to leave ourselves out, partly for that reason, because it's the most powerful thing we can bring. And if it's the most powerful thing we can bring, how are we going to leave part of ourselves at the door? So we have to be honest about our own needs. If we're going to bring ourselves to be the best possible professional helper we can be, we have to then take responsibility for meeting our own individual needs so that they don't muddy the waters of how we're trying to help the kids. And if I'm going to meet my own needs, I have to know them. And that takes our own kind of courage. To go to places, I thinking of a fellow he worked with years ago who said, why are we always talking about ourselves and us and our childhoods? It's the kids who've got problems. And of course, a lot of people come into the work wanting to help the kids. They don't think it's about them. They don't have that. And it's a bit of a kipper around the chops when you realise just how much we are impacted.
By I think Rich sums it up with me perfectly. Like he also says my biggest quality is also my biggest weakness. And he says that to me regularly. But I mean, you're absolutely right. And I guess I've never thought about it like that, really. It's always been the young person forefront. But actually, like this morning, just going to see them young people was like, this is why I did it. This is why we did it. This is why we and it's so interesting. So let's go back to why
the early story. Okay, all right. So I'm going to give you a version that, because my parents are still alive, and I'm going to give you the version that's kind of respectful of their privacy. But just in a nutshell as well, I from the age of 3, I grew up in a household that was my parents, my brother, and my grandmother. And here's a little insight how things changed. My grandmother was in her mid-50s when her husband died, and the family decision, and this is when I'm 3, the family decision is she's now too old to live independent at that point, mid-50s, my age, effectively. So kind of interesting decision. But anyway, that was my household that I grew up in. And again, in a nutshell, my older brother is 3 years older than me, and he was one of twins. And they were born premature, and the other twin died age 7 hours old. Neither of them were expected to live, and one didn't. So I'm then the kid 3 years later who comes along to effectively replace that twin. My parents only had 2 children. If that twin had survived, I wouldn't be here. And I don't think my family ever really got past that Plus, my parents had their own, they were both born in 1940 and 1941 in the middle of a war. Dads were absent of being involved in the war and stuff like that. My mum had an illness for the first 2 years of her life that meant she was in hospital a lot at a time when parents couldn't go visit in hospital. So they each bring their own, and here we are again about, our own individual needs. They each bring their own stories and limitations. And then, we're in this household where there's a dead child, present and absent. And that massively impacted my experience. And also I would go, and from the age of 2.5, I would go and be looked after by my gran before she moved in with us. And what I understood latterly is that for 6 months, I was going every day to the house when my grandfather was dying of blood cancer. So I'm with my grandmother, who's, already grieving. And then she moves in with us, and then she would rather the twin, she's no longer with us, of course. She would rather the twin boy had lived. So I'm kind of superfluous to requirements. And so that also, so I leave when I'm 19. I found the house suffocating. The bottom line about that is I found the house suffocating. There wasn't really room for emotional stuff. The way my family dealt with all those different impacts, all those different stories is just don't. But it's there. The house is full of it. Sorry, say again.
Needs dealing with as well, you can't.
And needs dealing with. Yeah, but from a generation that is post-war, and so anyway, that's just how it was. That's just who they were. There's probably not been a year since I was 20 that I haven't had a therapist or a supervisor or a mentor or a coach. I'm also a really big fan of, if we're going to really commit to continuous growth, which we have to do if we're going to know ourselves as well as we can, and we're going to make the best contribution we can to the kids we're trying to help, just keep going wherever seems like the place to go to learn the next thing. Go wherever you're drawn. So I've had a bunch of different people in different capacities and different kind of theoretical backgrounds. So I needed to get out of the house. I'd had enough of education, and I've never been back for Christmas. As an indication of the nature of the attachment between me and my family, since 19, there's been nothing there to draw me back, even for Christmas.
It's really interesting, actually. Because a lot of people in this sector, the care sector, what you're trying to do and the conversations you're having come from a care background, right? So
yes,
they have that start to their life. And it's interesting that you haven't been back. So you probably felt quite alone at times, and I don't want to delve into it too much, obviously, being respectful, but I suppose it's that story of how can I then help other people? Do you know what I mean? It's like, I felt like this, and now I've got that life experience to try and help other people.
Well, and that kind of brings us back to what motivates us to come into the work. And is it really altruistic? No, not really. At some level, at some cognitive level, it is. There is an intention to help. But me, age 19, moving on from that environment, vague notion, when I was kind of pretending that I might possibly go to university, I never really, it would have been dreadful for me. I would have been utterly overwhelmed socially in that environment. But I looked at behavioural sciences. I was interested in why do people do what they do. And that's what took me to working with young offenders. Because of that interest, I got placed there. But what else did I know? What was my level of awareness, age 19? Coming out zero.
That's one of my questions, right? I mean, I know what I was doing at 19, and you're thrown in the mix with some of the most challenging young people in this country. Did you feel old enough or experienced enough, or was it overwhelming, or how was that transition? Because that's quite the first step.
Okay, so there's probably still a link there to be made, actually. It's an interesting question, because given my place in my family, I think my place in my family was partly about soaking up some of that emotional stuff that was unbearable for them to process. So I'm kind of good at sitting with emotions. I'm good at sitting with pain. It's kind of my job in my family. It's the function I serve. So then I come into a different environment. Do I feel old enough? No, but my upbringing has already conditioned me to meet other people's needs first. My needs are less important than everybody else's because of what they've all been through. So I'm conditioned for that. That's my place. That's where it's okay. And I've developed some skills to be able to do that. So cognitively, am I interested in why people do what they do, and do I want to help? Yes, but I'm also bringing all of that part of myself that is kind of served by finding a new environment that still expects something similar from me. So no, I didn't feel old enough. And again, in terms of opportunity, so how can we each play our part in helping our care experienced young people find the best of themselves? Well, it's partly about giving them opportunity and having some trust in their abilities. So as a volunteer, my first 6 months was with a manager who just left me to do the filing. I don't think he was even really terribly interested in having a volunteer there. But then there were changes, new manager came in, and I remember sitting, just kind of minding my own business, being very quiet. I was a real observer then as well. Didn't speak up much. I mean, again, family stuff, just sit quietly, read books. As a kid, I spent a lot of time reading books because that's how I spent time on my own, or playing sport. And by the way, sport as well. The release, the physical release of all that stuff that otherwise would have been held up. Sport was a lifesaver for me too. So that combination of being kind of isolated, but being adventure stories, that still informs where I am. That still informs how I see life. It's all an adventure.
I don't know about you, Jane, but as like all the things you talk about in terms of like, what got you through the books, the exercise, the sport, I find myself, I was very like that as a young person, not so much reading, but you have your way outs, right? So you have your sport, and I was every sport. I would play everything. As you get older, you talk about looking into self and what you need. As I've got older, I've stopped.
Yeah.
So what's really interesting is probably the toughest times in our lives when we're younger. I know obviously tough changes as you get older. It's different things you sort of struggle with, but you stop doing the things that got you out of so much. I don't know about yourself. I mean, if you're still playing, but certainly myself, I've stopped doing any form of activity that got me through.
I think that partly speaks to what I was saying about I've had somebody help me in every year of my life, therapist, supervisor, coach, different people, different disciplines, different things at the right time. And I think those activities also change over time. So what I would say is going and playing hockey 3 times in a weekend, training 2 times a week, playing netball, javelin, shot put, athletics. I did everything at school. If it was available, I did it. Yeah. That was a discharge. I don't think it helped me process any of the emotional stuff. It didn't lead me towards resolution or peace. It just made it all bearable. It just offloaded it. It lost some of the weight of it. So
I think it changes though. When you're younger, you do it physically, and it helps you in a way that you are stimulated.
Yeah.
As sort of I've got older as well, and I've had therapists and I've had help. I think we always need someone to help us, right?
Yeah.
I think you then sort of working on your brain and your mental capacity, like that sort of stuff, and it changes as you get older.
Yeah, I'd agree completely. Yeah.
Yeah.
What works for you and what you need, because of course you have to interrupt those cycles, don't you? We and that's what we're trying to help our children to do as well. So there it is again. How can I model what it is that I'm trying to help our children do? I have to be brave enough to dig into my own pain, find my own resolution, find my own mechanisms for getting on, choose a different path in life. How am I going to really help them? There's a thing in the therapy world about you only really have to be a step ahead of your clients. And this speaks to your question about did I feel old enough? Well, if it all boils down to the human beings we are, if I'm a little bit ahead, so yeah, I found my way. And the thing about opportunity is, so this new manager came in, and he sat in his chair, arms folded, and he went, "You do it, you go." you go with Pauline and you do it. And he literally kind of took me out of the corner near the filing cabinet and sent me out with the social worker called Pauline to do a particular piece of work. And without him going, go on then, go and get your hands dirty, go and get some experience. I would never have had the opportunity. And him doing that meant by the time I was 21, I had a job. They took me on. The project I was in took me on. I was no longer volunteering. They made me an unqualified social worker. That was an actual job title at the time. Unqualified social worker. Which means
they have the title now and they still act unqualified.
Yeah.
You're not money joking.
We're all on a journey.
Yeah.
Age 21, I was now responsible for doing assessments of kids in their families. I was going in, I was turning up and sitting on families' sofas and talking to them about why their kids were getting into bother. And bother meant shop theft and truanting or waving shotguns at police officers. You know, the full range of kids doing stuff. And some families would look me up and down as I turned up on their doorstep, you know, age 20, 21. But they, again, you know, it all worked out. I suppose I'm thinking of one fella in particular who did exactly that. And it had been raining. I won't tell you the whole story, but I ended up on his doorstep like a drowned rat, a 20-year-old drowned rat. And he looked at me like I should have been delivering pizza rather than coming to help him with his child in the juvenile justice system. But she'd had a dreadful experience. And anyway, we came out of it with a really good outcome for her. And he shook my hand coming out of court and said, thank you very much. And, you know, it's like, you just bring the best of yourself and always have the humility to learn. What else could I do but learn? But without that fella giving me that opportunity, I would never have, I wouldn't be where I am now at all, because he put me there. And then it was him and another colleague who said, but look, you know, if you really want to learn about our kids and the experiences our kids have, you need to go to residential. You need to go and do residential. So I did, and they were right. I loved that next stage of my life as well. So I was 22 when I went to residential, and it was mayhem for the first 6 months.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, we could be here all day.
We could, yeah.
Just because I think you're so interesting and you've done so much. But let's get to what you're doing now. So tell us about the stuff you're doing now, how you got into it.
Yeah, cool.
Any sort of barriers you're facing with it, I suppose.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So again, it kind of all links together in terms of, 35, I've been doing this 35 years now, one way or the other, loads of different roles, different levels of seniority. I've been a foster parent, as well as that resi work. I've been a director, lots of different angles. And my imperative is really the same as it's always been, which is how can I help? It's always been whether this kid in front of me today compared to this kid in front of me tomorrow, compared to another kid in front of me today or another kid in front of me tomorrow, how can I help? What's my best contribution? So that's still where I am. What's my best contribution now? And I've been incredibly fortunate and privileged. The people I have met along those 35 years have been truly, truly pioneering and exceptional characters. Bit of a handful sometimes. I'm very drawn to charismatic leaders, it seems, and they're complicated people. But they changed the world. Those guys changed the world, and it's been amazing. So what am I doing now? I set up. I'll just mention 3FT because it's kind of part of where I am, and it is a hurdle. I set up 3FT, which is Fast Foster Family Transfers, a couple of years ago. Really, only last year I started thinking about it. A couple of years ago. The intention being to help foster families when they want to transfer from one fostering service to another, that they can get to do that really quickly and easily. The same as anybody else leaves a job, you know, it's not that big a deal. You do an interview, you give your notice, you move on.
So can you just explain that for me? So that process, myself and Rich have learned a lot about fostering over the last sort of 6 weeks. We obviously, but explain what you mean by changing. So obviously the agencies, the local authorities, like, can you just explain for people listening of what that means?
So when you become a foster family, foster carer, foster parent, I prefer foster parent. There's a big opinion that prefers foster carer, so I might interchange between the two. But when you get approved foster, you have to go through a whole process. It typically takes anywhere between 3.5 to 9 months. It's supposed to be done within 8 months, but it takes a long time. It's the most intensive process to get a job that anybody will ever go through. It takes a long time to become approved as a foster parent. Once you are approved, you have to be registered with a single fostering service, whether that's your local authority or whether it's an independent fostering service. You have to be registered with just one, and you're self-employed. So,
okay. Can I ask why you've only registered with one?
That's because the sector is regulated. So there are the fostering regulations that determine that. The reasoning behind the regulations, I'm not sure, to be honest. It's probably something to do with being monitored, being scrutinised. If you're linked with the service, then you're clearly, I'm kind of making this up a little bit, but you're clearly in that one place and your work is being supervised, overseen. It's governance, yeah.
Otherwise, people could slip between the cracks, between different and...
Yeah,
well,
I guess my thought process behind it is if I was a fostering agency in Bracknell Forest where I live, but there was a young person I could really benefit from Surrey, surely the outcomes are better for me. If I was trained in ASD or ADHD and we had a young person in Surrey that I could benefit, I suppose that's my thought process straight away, is like, surely it's a matching process from young person to family, right?
Now you're talking. So that's what it should be. And you know what? You've perhaps accidentally stumbled on. That's why the independent sector exists. Shall I tell you this story really quickly? Because we could spend all day talking.
Listen, we've got as long as we need as well. Right? There's no time limit on it.
Okay. All right. In the 1970s, there was a local authority social worker called Nancy Hazel. She worked for Kent as a local authority. She wanted to challenge the belief at the time that families could not foster teenagers. Teenagers could not be fostered. They would be too difficult and families wouldn't want to do it. So that meant that teenagers, if they couldn't live with their own families, they automatically went into group settings, residential homes, mum and baby units, borstalls, not great places in the 70s, and of course, coming out of the 60s. Nancy Hazel got funding to run a project, and she called for volunteers, and some of the existing foster families for Kent, foster families who were signed up with Kent, bearing in mind there were no independent agencies at that time, it's all local authorities. Some of these foster families stepped forward, volunteered. The project was studied by Goldsmiths. It was wildly successful. These teenagers were placed. They did really well by a set of measures. And then when the local authority funding ran out, the project came to an end. And all those local authority foster families just got absorbed back into the mainstream fostering. Everything that they'd learned, the structures that they'd put in place over the years of the project just kind of fell away. From there, in the 1980s, two of those fostering families got together and decided they were frustrated with the fact that the project hadn't carried on, and they set up the very first independent fostering organisation. They set up ISP, which still exists and it's still in Kent. And they did that partly, Brian, because they realised that if we're just independent, we could take any kid from any local authority, which means we could place more carefully to meet the child's needs. And that was the birth of the independent sector for exactly that reason, because otherwise, if you signed up for Bracknell Forest, you will only ever look after Bracknell Forest kids.
And so when did that change then? So you're saying obviously they set that up as in
1980. So 1987 was when ISP started, and ISP in Kent was the very first.
So they've obviously set it up not just to take young people from Kent, right?
Correct.
There's young people from everywhere, but what we're sort of saying now is it's got to a point where you've got all these independent. It's only because I'm interested. So you've got all these independent, but they can only take from one borough.
No. The independents can take from anywhere in the country.
Right. Okay.
But the boroughs still exist, so there's both sides of the coin, right?
Yeah. So if I'm fostering today, I could either sign up with my local authority in Kent, and I would only ever look after Kent children, or I could sign up with any of the 40-odd independent agencies in Kent, and I could look after any child from any county all over.
Signed to one agency.
Correct.
Okay, right. That's where I got a bit confused. But okay.
And do the agencies talk to each other? Well,
yeah, fair amount.
I guess it's the same as
they work
businesses,
together.
right?
Do they partner? Do they share, or are they very independent in their own right?
They're not really allowed to gather, and so there are rules about competition and stuff. I'm not going to even attempt to explain that any better because I don't know the right language. But the fostering network convenes forums for shared practice, and those fostering network forums, that's where the independents can get together and they can legitimately chat and share stuff. And it's changed over the decades. It used to be quite kind of insular and protective, and it's become a little bit more sharey. But it'll depend, county to county.
One of the conversations that myself and Richard and some people we've been spoken to, sorry, Richard. One of the things we've been talking about is I think foster care, and it would be interesting to get your opinion on this. I think foster carers I think it's fluffy. I think if you were to tell foster carers, the reality is you're going to get someone who's going to call you names and tell you to F off. And there's going to be times we worked on a really good thing where we were like, you might get a young boy who wants to go and watch Everton and you're a big Liverpool fan, but you have to put yourself out your comfort zone. I think there's a big problem with foster care where if we were real and we told people the reality of it would make more people want to be foster carers, but the training was better. We were training them around ASD, ADHD, SEMH. Like, we were training them around all the stuff. I don't know what you think on it, but I feel like it's going to be quite fluffy, and you're going to get a really lovely young person who's going to come through your door, and it's going to be, and then the reality is very different, so then it stops.
Do you know what? That project back in the 70s prove your point, and it's been forgotten. So what Nancy Hazel, social worker who set it all up, she wrote a few bits, in the years that came, and one of the things she said was the people who stepped forward were not the conventional, traditional mould of typical mainstream foster carer. The people who stepped up were the people who wanted the challenge. They were people who were expected to be treated as a colleague around the table, and she also said one of the founding premises of this thing working is that those who fostered were considered to have professional parity with everybody else around the table around the child, the teachers, the social workers, anybody else. And by the way, the pay for those people who fostered was determined to be the same. If you looked after two kids, your income was going to be the same as a teacher, in order to kind of set that benchmark of parity in every respect. That's what she identified. So those two foster parents who stepped forward and set up the first independent organisation, they came from that basis of, we know what we're doing. We have parity around the table. We can do this. Those who foster are the people who know the kids best because they look after them. And so they created that environment within which those people they attracted, they absolutely told them the challenges. And I worked for those people. One of the reasons I know this story, because most people don't know this story. Her name was Bridgine Gorman. One of the foster parents who set up ISP was Bridgine. And she then, once she moved on from ISP, she set up By the Bridge. And By the Bridge is now massive because it's been through various stages of being bought out and so on. But By the Bridge, when I joined it was still just a little family organisation. I was staff member number 14. So I know this pedigree, I know this heritage, because Bridge was one of those foster parents who stepped forward in the 1970s. And all the way through, so I worked for them for 9 years in different organisations. We always told the truth. Anybody who came to apply to, so we put out adverts that told them how challenging it was going to be. We put out adverts that sometimes included the money, because the people, we want to attract people who need to pay the bills. We want to attract people who are perhaps coming from other professional positions. One of the factors about people deciding what careers they're going to pursue is, can I afford to pay for the lifestyle that I have? So what you're saying, Brian, about there's a different way of recruiting families and then looking after them, couldn't agree more. The roots of that are all the way back in the 1970s, but the sector has forgotten, widely, the sector has forgotten, I would say, and we could definitely improve on that.
Yeah, 100%. So tell us, sorry, I know we're
getting
a bit. Talk to us about 3FT.
Okay, so having established foster families can only register for a single organisation. When they want to transfer to another organisation, they have to go through this whole process because the regulations say their suitability has to be assessed again. The way most people do that is by doing it in the same way as they did it when the people had no experience of fostering, when they were brand new. They use the same tools, they go through the same process. Now, what that means is it takes months. So you could have been fostering for 5 years. You've proven your suitability because your suitability gets reviewed every year. So you've proven it. Let's assume for now nothing's gone wrong. There's been no complaints. There's been no allegations. There's been no, these people did turn out to be good foster parents. Your 5 years of fostering, having gained loads of experience, gained loads of skills, proved that you're suitable. You now have to go through the same process you went through when you started and you knew nothing, which makes no sense because the process when people are brand new and they know nothing, all of the evidence that's being gathered about whether they're going to be good at fostering or not is hypothetical. They haven't fostered yet. We can't test it specifically. We can only test transferable and relevant experiences.
Yeah.
So the initial assessment of suitability is a hypothesis. We think they're going to be all right. And then we're going to review that every year because the regulations say we have to. So then we've reviewed it every year. And every year we sign off to say, yes, they're still suitable. Now they want to leave. So we're going to go back and start again using a process that was only ever really a hypothesis when we have a shed load of evidence of their actual fostering now. And of course that evidence does get rolled into the process, but there's no need to do the rest. You could just look at the evidence of their actual fostering. Yeah. Now, I learned how to do that in 2015. The organisation I was in, we decided to try and figure out how to speed up that process because when a family put up their hand to say they want to leave, they too often get treated badly. Independent fostering organisations generate their income based on the families they have. They get paid per kid placed per family. So if families leave, the revenue for that organisation diminishes. Local authorities, they save money by having they think they do. They don't, not really. There's been lots of studies into that. The cost is comparative, but if they have to place their child in an independent service, they have to pay fees that cover the independent's overheads. That's how it works. If they just pay their own foster family, they don't have to pay those extra overheads. That's a fact. So the local authority also doesn't want their families to leave. So those families then become hugely valuable and can get treated poorly, partly as a deterrent to other people who might be thinking of leaving. And even if they're treated well, it takes months to go through this process. So they want to be over there. They have to sit over here waiting to jump through hoops that they've already jumped through that don't really add any value about their suitability. So 2015, we figured out how to truncate that and make the process really quick, just a few weeks, not a few months. Just as robust, we were inspected by Ofsted, found to be outstanding, inspected again, outstanding again, got a sister organisation, introduced that process there. They got inspected and they went from good to outstanding. So as a process, it's fine. It works and it's much better. We did it because it's better for the families. Because of course,
if ask a quick question, just
yes,
while it's in my head.
Yes.
Is there a difference? Sorry.
No.
We're going all over the place. I love it.
Catch him.
No, I'm really sorry.
No.
Between what the funding. So, if you are a foster carer for independent,
yep,
is the funding more than it would be if you were a foster carer between local authority? The reason I'm saying that is because you're probably getting a bit of local authorities wanting to place themselves and have their own foster carers and using them.
Yeah.
Because if it's independent, is it more expensive or is there bigger costs? Or, do you know what I mean?
Well, if imagine the local authority pay their foster family exactly the same as the independent next door pays their foster families. The difference in cost to the local authority is for also paying for the independent's infrastructure.
So
now, what local
is more expensive?
It's more expensive for the local authority to place a child because they have to pay the fees. Let's just round figures. Let's just say it's typically £1,000 per week per child to place a child in an independent. Some will be less than that, some will be more than that. And I'm speaking very, very generally for round numbers. The local authority wouldn't have to pay that £1,000 per week per child to their own family, because they're paying that £1,000 per week per child to cover the supervising social workers and the training and everything the independent provides. However, what local authorities forget is they also have those same overheads. The cost of a local authority, the cost of a child being looked after by a local authority is not limited to what they pay the foster family. They also have the costs of their CEO and their, not CEO, the director, and the supervising social workers and the training and the DBS checks. And so the cost of a child placed in local authority, there's been loads and loads and loads of reports. It's always comes out as being pretty much the same, sometimes cheaper in independent. And for particular kids with particular needs, it's often better value in independent because it's better matched and there's more resources into that child, because the independents can be more kind of agile about what resources they can access for kids with more needs. And this is all a bit controversial. You're going to get opinion on this.
Final question on this, because I know we're way in the weeds in the detail here. Why would a family want to transfer from one independent to another?
Good question. All right. So there are some out there who will say they only want to move because they're looking to run away from trouble. You know, they've been caught out for being not good enough, and now they're trying to shirk responsibilities and avoid consequences. You know, maybe there's been a complaint, maybe there's been an allegation, and they just want to leave it all behind. There are some out there who would put that top of the list as the reason somebody wants to leave. It's certainly possible. Have you guys ever changed jobs, or have you been in the same job since you left school?
I've changed plenty.
Okay, why did you change? What?
Number of reasons. Sometimes financially, sometimes the environment wasn't right. The people I was working with.
It just wasn't the right fit for you anymore. You wanted to be somewhere else. So why wouldn't a foster family want to go work for another organisation? They might have been perfectly happy here for 5 years. They've done all the training. They're feeling a bit stale. They want a bit of a refresh. Their mates work for the place over the road there, and there's a whole different environment. There's a different buzz. There's different people. There's new people to learn from. Why wouldn't you want to go? People might want to transfer for all the same reasons any of us might want to change employers.
Yeah. Matt, right? Let's stop, Richard. Stop.
Might need to be another episode with Louise Allen as well.
Well, you do.
I think really interesting is to do some stuff with Jane around like video content. Like, it's brilliant. It's so insightful. Storyteller. Let's move on to Storyteller.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so Storyteller is a digital platform in which memory box material for our children in care can be uploaded. So adults around kids in care are already supposed to be keeping memory box stuff, as we know. Chuck it in. Go to Alton Towers, take the wristband, chuck it in a box, ready for when the kid leaves. It helps the child to remember where they've been, what they've done. We know that our children in care jump around way too often. They can lose track of exactly where they've been and when. The impact of trauma can make it really hard to link memories together. So all of that stuff. I won't go into too much detail about the why we keep memory box material, but if you're taking a program or a still photo or an Alton Towers wristband and checking it in a plastic box, that box is too easily lost as the kids move from place to place. It's certainly too easily lost as they leave the care system and enter into adulthood, and then whatever life brings for them, they still have to hang on to this box. And the thing that Storyteller adds is it's digital, so you can upload video, you can upload audio. What we're very, very keen to do, so with Storyteller is delivered by Aftercloud. We are in partnership with Quorum. Quorum have helped us develop it. We have an incredible steering group of the most incredible practitioners and smart people, many of whom are care experienced. So different roads through life and so on, but all really accomplished and articulate and just amazing. So they've given us their views, they've helped us to develop it. We're also in partnership just recently with a little charity called The Vision. Carly and Demi. Carly and Demi are amazing, and other guys, associates in The Vision. They're helping us do some video material to really engage young people with using the Storyteller app, because, and this is a long-winded way round to, something I'm super keen on is, let's capture the child's voice as part of their own memory box material. Let's capture the child's own part of their story, because if we leave it to the adults, we're getting all kinds of perspectives on what the child's story is, but without the child's perspective, it's not the whole story. So let's build the app so that it's as appealing as it can be for kids to join in and capture their own stuff, not just the adults, but then also, and this is the thing I'm super excited about, and if we're going to talk about the podcast in a minute, whether we do or don't, I don't know, but if we do, it's part of the thing. What I'm super excited about is let's then also help our children who are using the Storyteller app, let's help them imagine their own futures. Let's help them claim their own narrative and write their own story. And let's help them do that by giving them inspirational material from adults who've grown up and moved on from the care system. Because our children might not be able to see that for themselves. Too many of the adults in the system around the child don't have high enough aspirations for our children.
And they're also giving you a version that's making them sound like they are doing the most incredible job, right? do you know what I mean? So, and I'm not saying that's always, by the way. What I'm saying is,
sure,
you're not getting a real view. I guess. I mean, me and Rich met you on this. I thought it was one of the most, being involved with young people to come through our doors, it was one of the most inspirational things, because
awesome.
You talk about memories, and we have memories, good and bad, we all have them. The thing I loved about this is I thought every child that comes through our doors would impact from it. Because it will tell you, and I don't always get that when we get offered stuff. I don't.
Okay.
I think there's some good stuff, but the thing I loved about you and Darren is that I loved this because I thought every child that goes through the care system, and I actually think every child in the country would benefit. You know what I mean? Like, I know you have to work on a specific, and it's important to you guys, but to have memories of everything you've done, good and bad, so you can look back and go, what, we're talking about ourselves and how we need to get stuff out of things and the trauma and the impact and this. But there are things you forget. And this gives it gives you the voice, which I think is so important. It's one of the things I constantly talk about is the child's voice. But it's an incredible app, and we will obviously add it to the link in here so people can have a look at it. But it's brilliant.
Yeah,
so well done on it. It's amazing, and we're going to pilot in our homes. So
yeah, fantastic.
I can't wait to see what the young people do with it.
Me too, because we've got a ton of ideas. The potential of this is just, it is brimming over with potential, and we've got a ton of ideas, but we want to co-develop it as widely as we can to make it the best value it can be. So yeah, we're dead keen to work with you guys and your kids.
Yeah, and I guess, like, when we met Dougie last week, I was like, oh my God, you can do it for this young person, and I was like, sometimes you just have to get the things right, because there's so many ideas. And that's what I've kind of noticed with you is you're like, this is the focus, this is the vision, this is what we need to get right. And then the rest of it will come further down the line.
It's got to be purpose, hasn't it? And Purpose Playbook, right? Why are we doing it? What are we bothering? Let's not get distracted by what other people will think or what the agendas are. Let's not be naive. Let's think it through. But Rich, you kind of introduced me by saying that I followed my nose. I've never had a plan. I can't say I've had a career because I've never had a plan. I've just gone from wherever that looks like it's interesting. Let's go and do that. Or somebody said you should. So all right then. I will.
I think that's why we all get on so well.
Yeah,
we're all making it up.
Planning is not our
if you've got the right purpose and drive, you'll find your route and you'll find your path. And I think that's what all three of us have done, to be honest. Let's finish by talking about the podcast, because it's super exciting from what Rich has told me. So tell us about the podcast. Tell us what you're looking to do, and then we'll sort of wrap it up.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so. I mentioned earlier, I'm connected with a whole bunch of care experienced people and through LinkedIn primarily in the first instance, but relationships have formed from there. And I was just blown away. I only joined LinkedIn a couple of years ago. Just blown away by this new exposure for me to just how many people are out there doing the most amazing things, truly talented and skilled, and that kind of ramped up again my aspiration for what to expect of our kids in care, and how to help them understand what is out there and possible for them. And not just as an opportunity for them, but as an opportunity for the world. These guys are changing the world. It is extraordinary, and a real humility for me to take a step back, because I have seen nothing more transformational. In these 35 years, children's social care, I have seen nothing more transformational than the voice of the mature, care experienced adult. Those guys who've been through it a bit, they're out of childhood, they've processed some stuff, their brains have, settled down and matured properly, and they can now articulate, and they have those amazing skills. So anyway, I heard somebody say, look, if you really want to be, what's the word? An ally. If you really want to be an ally to care experienced people, amplify our voices, don't drown us out. And that again was a kipper around the chops. What an easy mistake that would be to make. So all of that conspires to, I got really interested in how can we help these incredible care experienced people who are providing services into children's social care, and other people who are not particularly providing children's social care but are living lives that are nevertheless utterly inspirational and invaluable for our children. How can we harness that a bit more? How can we foster a bit more collaboration? How can we ramp up the connectivity to build something that's greater than the sum of the parts? Because look, why would we not? Oh my God. And I'm back to what's my best contribution? How could I help with that? So the podcast. The intention is to have guests who are those care experienced people, co-hosting it with Sarah Jacoby, CEO of Comfort Cases. Sarah and I met initially on LinkedIn, but then at a conference. We have the same values. Our brains work well together. We connect for no reason other than the potential benefit of the people who are connected. We connect. We do that all the time. So we're kind of naturally inclined towards. We have a skill set and a value base that is naturally leading towards. We could do something with this. We can contribute and bring people together. So the podcast, we'll start with people we know, because we want it to be really relational. We want to capture the lives those care experienced people are living now. We're not going to go over childhood stuff. It's going to be, lighthearted and just really tapping into what do you love about your life now? And is it the life you imagined for yourself? And what helps you get there? How have you overcome some of the speed bumps? And we will take, with the guest's permission, of course, the intention is that we will take snippets out of these podcasts and download them into the Storyteller app. We'll ask some questions that are specifically for Storyteller so that they can speak directly to the children who are using the Storyteller app. And this is how it all links back into the helping the children write their own future stories. But also that podcast will then serve to begin to form a network of these care experienced folk. And we can help to amplify. So our values are amplify, celebrate, harness and nourish. And we're talking about care experienced adults, but also the community, the network of care experienced adults, because they're all busy doing their own thing, being quite single-minded, and that's how come they're successful. So is there a part we could play, that Sarah and I could play, just to foster a bit more connectivity? So the podcast is kind of a starting point for that.
And having spent a lot of time with you both.
Thank you.
The dynamic between you two is fantastic. In some ways, you're very opposite, but you're completely aligned. And I went through a bit of a process because I'm sort of helping you to bring that podcast alive, and actually interviewing you both separately about the same thing, and then taking a step back and looking that your drivers and purpose and why you were doing it were just, some of the stuff was word for word. You're so aligned, yet so different. I think that brings a really nice dynamic to that podcast. I think it's going to be brilliant.
Yeah, and it's not about ego. So folk on LinkedIn who follow me will see me talking about we need an ecosystem, not an ego system. And there's nothing in what Sarah and I are doing that is about ego. And that loops us back to the beginning, which is about, we're also not leaving ourselves out. It would be a mistake. It is always a mistake to leave yourself out and think you're utterly selfless, because you can't be. But if you know yourself, well, then you can take care of that and focus on what you're here to do. So ecosystem, not ecosystem. The premise of an ecosystem is that everybody benefits. The system benefits one way or the other. Whereas an ecosystem is about me first. How can I take care of myself? what's the best opportunity for me? We need an ecosystem, not an ecosystem.
Yeah, I love it, and I guess just I mean, I've met you twice, 3 times. The thing I love, and the same with Sarah, and that anyone I've met who's involved with you, is here's the problem, where's the solution, and how can we help? And it resonates so much with me and Rich. Like we constantly speak about
like-minded, right?
And how, 100%. And I mean, we spent an hour together, and we all walked off that call going, "Oh my god, like it's brilliant! Like it's so the synergy's so high." So I guess we'll wrap it up. But thank you so much for coming on.
Guys, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I mean, we could do this all day.
I was going to say you're one of those guests that if we made this a day session, we would still be talking at 5 o'clock. I think.
We could. Yeah,
and it's so interesting, and I think the knowledge you've gained over the years and why you do what you want to do is just incredible. So keep up the good work, because I know how much it will benefit the young people in our homes, and I can't wait to come on that steering group with you guys and help you navigate your way with it and be a small part of that. Everything Jane is doing will be in below the video. Thank you so much for coming on. We really, really appreciate it, and we can't wait to continue to work with you.
Oh, it's been a blast. I love having these conversations with people who, just the same energy, and that's what the podcast is going to be, and it's going to be bigger than that too. And so, next chapter, following my notes to the next chapter. Thank you for having me, guys.
Thank you very much.